Shaquille O'Neal is a man of many talents. From his dominance on the NBA court to his media presence and TV personality to his humorous rapping and acting career, Shaq has done it all. At times, he might have been controversial and not everybody loves the big fella, but there's one thing about Shaq that separates him from the rest of the world. And that's the ability to give himself a nickname, and it actually catches on. How's it going, fellas? My name's Andy, and today we're gonna take a look at all of Shaq's iconic nicknames, as well as how he got all of them. But before we begin, this video is sponsored by Squarespace. Visit squarespace.com/AndyHoops to get 10% off your first purchase. Alright, let's get started. The Big Aristotle. Now, throughout Shaq's entire life, he's mentioned multiple times how people used to call him big and dumb. He got into a lot of fights in school, and he was never considered as the brightest student. However, by the year 2000, Shaq was on top of the world. He led the Lakers to the championship, dominating his way through the entire playoffs. To cap it all off, he had arguably the greatest finals performance in NBA history. Against the Pacers, he averaged 38 points and 17 rebounds a game on 61% from the field. But Shaq did not consider that his greatest accomplishment, because in that same year he went back to college, took some more courses, and graduated from LSU, which was a goal that his mother wanted him to achieve. Shaq said, "With all I've accomplished, if I don't have an education to handle these things, nothing matters. I have a lot of money, but I wouldn't be able to handle it without an education." Shaq then jokingly said, "For all my friends in the media who likes quotes, mark this quote down. From this day on, I'd like to be known as the Big Aristotle, because Aristotle once said, excellence is not a singular act, it's a habit. You are what you repeatedly do." The Big Shamrock. For a player as dominant as Shaq, it's actually surprising he played for so many teams. In his 19-year career, he played for 6 different teams. And in his final season in the NBA, he joined the Boston Celtics, and right after he signed with them, he said on Twitter that he needed a new nickname. So after a bunch of online polls with options that included the Big Shamrock, the Big Leprechaun, Shaqovic, and the Green Monster, eventually the Big Shamrock got the most votes, and that became Shaq's new nickname in Boston.
One of the biggest attractions out here, though, the Big Shamrock. I'm talking about Shaquille O'Neal totally putting on a show on the court.
Unfortunately, that nickname did not stay around for that long because he only played in 37 games for the Celtics, got injured, and shortly after, he retired from basketball. The Big Shaqtus. This nickname originated from one of ESPN's RV commercials.
See, I told you so.
I have to touch it.
No one touches the Shaqtus.
All right.
Beautiful, isn't it?
Back then, these commercials were amazing. I thought all of them were hilarious. This was around the time Shaq joined the Phoenix Suns, so the nickname Big Shaqtus was a perfect fit and it rolls off the tongue. Others loved the nickname too, it was catchy. However, an online clothing company called Shaqtus Orange Clothing started to sell merchandise under the Shaqtus name, which caused some controversy. Shaq realized that they were using his trademark name without permission and filed a lawsuit. However, the owner of Shaqtus Orange Clothing claimed that he believed him and Shaq had a mutual agreement to use the Shaqtus name in his clothing. He also claimed that he talked to Shaq, took a photo with him, and got his permission to use it. The lawyers on both sides would go back and forth, and eventually a settlement was reached. Shaq was the first person to trademark the nickname, so it did belong to him. And yeah, that's basically how Shaq got the nickname the Big Shaqtus. Superman. Perhaps Shaq's most famous nickname, and also one of the first ones he's ever had. Shaq called himself Superman because, well, he's a huge fan of Superman. He even has a tattoo of the Superman logo on his left arm. He also designed his mansion in Florida with a lot of Superman-related perks. And when he played in the NBA, he definitely looked like Superman out there. This is the nickname that Shaq cherishes the most because years later when he got older and people started to call Dwight Howard Superman, it really pissed him off. Because it felt like it should be his nickname and that Dwight hasn't done anything to earn that. That's the main reason why Shaq and Dwight have had beef over the years. During Shaq's time in Cleveland, it was very clear, even LeBron said that, The whole Superman thing kind of bothers him. That's definitely his nickname, and the fact that everybody kind of gave Dwight his name kind of bothers him a little bit. The Diesel. Another nickname that's been around since the 1990s. Shaq called himself the Diesel because of how powerful he was. He compared his own strength to that of an engine. The nickname started to catch on in 1993 when he released his first album called Shaq Diesel. He also has a tattoo of the Diesel as well. In my opinion, this is my favorite nickname of Shaq. It was probably the most popular too, as the announcers and commentators would often refer to him as the Diesel every time he made a powerful move in the paint. Over the years, the nickname has always been with him no matter where he played, cause even though Shaq started to get older and slower, he was still the strongest, most powerful player in the league up until his retirement. Shaq Fu. This nickname originated from the Shaq Fu video game, released in 1994 for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System and the Genesis. Shaq also created an album later that year called Shaq Fu: The Return. Occasionally, Shaq would mention Shaq Fu in certain situations, like when he was about to play against Yao Ming, but besides that, it never got used much. Maybe it had something to do with how, Shaq Fu wasn't a good game at all. Even their recent remake, which came out in June of 2018 called Shaq Fu: A Legend Reborn, that was not very successful either. I like the nickname, but in general, it didn't really stick. The Big Baryshnikov. Shaq is also a great dancer. Well, maybe not, but he certainly enjoys dancing. At some point in the late 2000s, he started to call himself the Big Baryshnikov, named after famous ballet dancer Mikhail Baryshnikov. While this comparison seems like a total stretch, he called himself that because even though most people think that he dominated the game through sheer strength, Shaq was surprisingly agile. He had great footwork, great balance, and positioning. You can't dominate the paint with just power. Shaq had the power and the grace. Dr. O'Neal. Although this isn't really a nickname, Shaq started to call himself Dr. O'Neal after he got his PhD in education. Shaq Daddy. When Shaq had his first child, Sharif, in 2000, he started to call himself Shaq Daddy. It was a catchy nickname, and sometimes he would also want other players to refer to him as Shaq Daddy on the court as he dominates them. Manny Shaquiao. Another one of Shaq's hobbies include boxing and mixed martial arts. One time he challenged South Korean kickboxer Chae Hong-man to an MMA fight, but later on he backed out of it. Shaq is also a big fan of Manny Pacquiao, so you can guess where this nickname comes from. Wilt Chamberlain. Another funny nickname, of course paying homage to Wilt Chamberlain, who Shaq has a tremendous amount of respect for. Hobo Master. He referred to himself as Hobo Master because growing up, Shaq always considered himself to be a hobo, but because of basketball, he was able to make it and live the life he does now. The name seems completely random, and it's probably the weirdest nickname on this list. The Big E Quotation. During his playing days, Shaq was one of the most quotable athletes in the world. Almost everything he said was gold, whether he was roasting someone or just trying to be funny. When Twitter started to get popular, Shaq would continue with his quotes and started to call himself the Big E Quotation. The Big Deporter. During the 2000 playoffs, Shaq was matched up against Arvydas Sabonis in the conference finals. Then in the finals, he matched up against Rick Smits. Shaq would dominate both of them, to the point where, after the playoffs were over, Sabonis and Rick Smits said to the media that they were considering going back home to Europe. And Smits actually did. He retired after the Pacers lost to Shaq in the finals and returned back to the Netherlands. Sabonis would play in Portland for 2 more years and return back to Lithuania. Although for both of them, it was mainly because they were just getting old. But Shaq took this opportunity to say that he wanted to be known as the Big Deporter. Shaqovic. While Shaq was playing in Phoenix, there was a 2-week stretch where he was making a very high percentage of his free throws. It was from December 29, 2008 to January 11, 2009. In those 2 weeks, he played in 5 games and shot about 8 free throws a game, hitting 79% of them. Despite the small sample size, that's a good percentage, but for Shaq, it was an amazing percentage. In fact, it was so amazing that when a reporter asked Shaq about his improved free throw percentage, he responded by saying, "You guys can now call me Shaqovic." Basically, he referred to how a lot of the best shooters in the league were European and their last names ended in "ich." And last but not least, Osama Bin Shaq. Man, I don't even know. Apparently, during the 2002 finals against the Nets, he was destroying Keith Van Horn and Todd McCulloch. He was terrorizing him in the paint, and because he was dominating him so badly, he called himself Osama Bin Shaq. Probably not the best nickname considering that 9/11 happened just 9 months prior. Anyway, that's all folks. Those were all of Shaq's nicknames and why he got them. Or at least those are his most well-known nicknames. He probably has a lot more that I've never heard of. Once again, I'd like to give a shout out to my sponsors at Squarespace. If you want to build your own website or online store, Squarespace makes everything simple. They've got a variety of different designer templates to choose from, and they're all very clean. If you want to set up your own sports website or a blog, you can do that. If you want to create an online store, Squarespace lets you easily manage your products, your orders, and your inventory. The marketing tools let you analyze who visits your website so you can get a better idea of who your audience is. Check out squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/AndyHoops to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain. Let me know your thoughts on the video. What's your favorite Shaq nickname? Let me know in the comments. Thank you everyone so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, I'll see you next time. Peace.